Hey everyone, I'm Matthew, and this is The Matthew Kent Show, a podcast about going from average to awesome, where I share my thoughts on my journey to become healthy, wealthy, and wise. Hey everyone, welcome to the inaugural episode of the Matthew Kent Show. I'm super excited about it. I figured I would start off by sharing a little bit about myself, kind of telling my story. People like stories in general, and that's kind of how information gets communicated. You know, one of the things that we know about humanity is that for as far back as we can trace it, we've all been telling each other stories. So stories are powerful, and it's something that I think, it's taken me a long time to really internalize because, I very much consider myself a teacher. I like sharing information. I like sharing the lessons and the ideas. But the act of narrative and of turning something into a story, I think, is powerful in a lot of levels. So first, I'll just, start with a couple quick facts about myself. I'm 31 years old, happily married, father of two, living in Gainesville, Florida, beautiful, shiny city town. I don't know what you call it of Gainesville. And, like a lot of people probably, I have a regular job, 9-to-5 job, and feel sort of trapped in the rat race. Feel like I kind of ended up here by default and not with a lot of intentionality. And so it's something that's been frustrating for me for a while. I think it's the fruit of a lot of bad decisions that I've made in the past and things that I'm looking to turn around now. And, I think in many ways, the story of where I am now is the story of a change in mindset, a transition from what might be called a fixed mindset to a growth mindset. And I'll define those in a minute. But like when I look back on my childhood, and I had a great childhood, actually, I had a mom who loved me. I had a sister who I loved and who loved me. I had a few really close, good friends. I had lots of good books that I read. I did interesting things during summer vacation. I really liked growing up. I really loved my life, but there was always this element that was present with me, this element of fear and the fear of the future and the fear of having to take on real responsibility. And, I knew that some point in my future was going to be college and applying for college. And I knew that was going to be stressful. And then after that, finding a job and making a career. And I knew that was going to be stressful. And I wasn't looking forward to it. And really, fear is the best I could describe it there. And I think whether I knew it or not, I had what a psychologist might call a fixed mindset. And the idea of a fixed mindset is sort of that, well, listen, you're not going to be Mozart. You're not going to be, the next Bach. You're not going to be the next Isaac Newton. You're not going to be anybody special because we basically know all that we need to know about you and your potential already. If you had any talent, we would have seen it by now. And so, yes, there's room where you can improve in any given area of your life, but maybe only like 5% improvement is going to be like the best that you can hope for. And so what happens if you have a fixed mindset is you develop this crippling fear of failure, because failure is almost like you being exposed, right? Like if you do something and you stink at it initially, it just means that you stink at that thing and you're not going to get any better. So you might as well try to avoid things that you don't think you're going to be good at, because there's not much room for improvement. And one of the ways that this manifests itself is actually you start lying about results that other people can't necessarily verify. So I remember in high school, there was like this weird culture, and I did this several times, and I suspected other people of doing this also, but like I could never prove it. But there was this weird culture where somebody would be like, yeah, I got a 92 on that test, but I didn't study at all. And, that's part of like the fixed mindset is, even if they did study at all and they were just lying about it, or sometimes they might even be lying about the results of their test. They might not have gotten a 92. They might have gotten a 78. But just this aspect of having to show like, yeah, I didn't even work at it. And it became like a way to save face, where even if you did get a bad result on a test, you could be like, well, yeah, I got a 78, but I didn't study at all. And so this aspect of not trying, not putting any effort into something, in a weird way, sort of became a source of pride. Now, the fixed mindset, though, I mean, like just emotionally, it can be devastating. I remember, this is a good story to illustrate this. This is from back in middle school. So for me, that was, maybe 1999, maybe 2000, something in there, where I was at a private school, and we were doing a unit on world religions. And so I think we're going to study like Hinduism and, Judaism, Christianity, Islam, that sort of thing. And, I think we had just finished Judaism, and we were going to move on to the unit on Christianity, which I was excited about because, I wanted to, be the kid who knew all the answers and to show off in that way. And this seemed like my chance because, I had been going to church my whole life. I had just become a Christian. I had just gotten baptized. I'd started to read the Bible. And so, I'm thinking like, man, they do sort of an interactive thing here with this class where they ask a lot of questions, and I'm going to actually, probably have some answers and some pretty deep stuff that other people don't know. And so, right in the very introduction to Christianity, like we haven't read anything yet, we haven't done anything yet. The very first time we sit down as a class, the teacher starts out by asking the class the question, okay, we just finished the unit on Judaism. Who can tell me what the difference is between Judaism and Christianity? And my hand shot into the air. I mean, I was ready. I was eager. And she called on me, and I think I gave my answer pretty quick. I don't think there was a lot of actual time that elapsed here, but it's one of those things where it's weird because I can remember like the split second that was like actually like time slowed down. It was like a longer period of time, in my mind. And like I actually had a lot of time to think through and actually like go through several different options about how to answer this question. Cause I think my first instinct was like, okay, Jews don't believe in Jesus. And then I had the thought that like, wait a minute, that's a really bad answer because it's just so vague. Like, what does that even mean? Believe in Jesus? Believe that he existed? I mean, probably most Jews believe that he existed. So it's not a good answer. Try something else. Like, what about if I said, Jews don't believe that Jesus rose from the dead, which is true. But it's not quite, big enough. Like it doesn't encompass the divinity of Jesus. It doesn't, and the difference in belief there. There's a lot that it leaves out. And one of the big things that it leaves out to me is it doesn't, I think the best answer to that question would make some kind of like acknowledgement between the relationship between Judaism and Christianity. So what I went with, I thought to myself, well, the real thing, and you could talk about this several different ways and whether or not, divinity is part of this or whether or not the resurrection from the dead is part of this. But you could say that Jews don't believe that Jesus is the Messiah, the anointed one, the Christ. And so that was the answer I said. I said, Jews don't believe that Jesus was the Christ. And I was expecting her to either, say, hey, great job. Or maybe if she didn't quite like that answer, it was because she had thought one of the other answers that I had already thought of was better. And I was basically just prepared to explain why my answer was better, to kind of like argue with the teacher because I was that kind of kid. But I really got taken aback by what happened, which was that she started to look really, really uncomfortable. Like she had expected me to get the answer to the question right, and I had gotten it very, very, very wrong. And so she kind of like, does anybody else have any thoughts on this? And my friend Jonathan, his hand shoots like way high in the air. She calls on him and he says, Jews don't believe that Jesus was the Messiah. Now, if you know anything about Hebrew or Greek or English for that matter, or Judaism or Christianity, you might already know that Messiah, which comes from the Hebrew word Mashiach, which just means the anointed one, and Christ, which comes from the Greek word Christos, just means the anointed one. So Messiah and Christ mean the exact same thing. I don't know, maybe my teacher thought Christ was Jesus's last name or something like that. But essentially, my friend and I gave the exact same answer. She thought I was wrong, and she, congratulated him for getting the question right. And I felt such shame, like you can't even imagine. My face just completely turned red. I have no idea what happened the rest of that day. It's remarkable that I can remember this clearly, down to my very thought process, down to the emotions that I was feeling 20 years later. And notice this. Even 20 years later, I'm sitting here telling you this story on this podcast, and I had to make a point of taking like an extra 5 minutes there to explain, right? Not that just that this happened and that I got a question wrong and that I was ashamed because of it, but that I was actually right all along, and the teacher was the one who was wrong. So that's more of like even now a fixed mindset, still sort of, because it doesn't matter that if I was wrong or not. Like if you have what's called a growth mindset, and a growth mindset is this idea that, yeah, there's probably some limit to your potential, but because it's so far beyond where you are now, you might as well treat it as being limitless. Like you have so much room to grow personally. You have so much room to grow athletically. You have so much room to grow intellectually. You have so much room to grow in terms of wisdom and maturity and decision making, that we can basically consider your potential unlimited. And so in this mindset, getting the question wrong is not a problem. The fact that you were courageous enough to provide an answer is what's important. And in fact, it's probably even a little bit better if I was very sure of the answer in that situation. And that's part of a fixed mindset, is like you only raise your hand if you're sure you know the answer. Whereas like the growth mindset just says, hey, if you think you can take a worthwhile stab, it's worth it to move the conversation forward. So that's kind of, as I was growing up, that's kind of how I lived, is in fear of this shame of being exposed as a fraud, because I always thought of myself as kind of like an intelligent kid and a good kid and these kind of things. But, I realized there were areas where I wasn't good. And so even here's another story. I remember sometimes I would go to my friend's house, and he had an older brother who was really into skateboarding. This brother was like 4 years older than him. And, we'd all be hanging out. But then sometimes he'd have to go do his homework or something. And so what I would do is I wouldn't, skateboard with them when they were skateboarding. I'd just watch them skateboard. But then I'd take the skateboard out when they were not hanging out with me. I didn't have a skateboard of my own. I'd just take one of theirs and go out into the street and practice. And the reason for that is, I didn't want them to see me mess up. And that's the thing. You're like, when you have this fixed mindset, you're hiding. You don't want to practice in public. You want to practice in private, not let anybody see the errors, not let anybody see the growth process, not want to admit the growth process. Your whole life is built around the idea of natural talent and that you have it. And then there becomes this ironic thing where part of you realizes that you don't, that you're not all that in every area. And so instead of just admitting that, owning up to it and growing, you start to hide. And this really got me into trouble. I mean, going into college, I didn't even think about like applying to like Harvard or anything like that. And I don't think you need to go like Harvard to, validate your own existence or something like that. But I mean, the entire reason that I didn't even try was, I'm scared of the admission process. I was scared of getting rejected. I went to like the safer state school. When I got in there, I just kind of followed the path of least resistance and, took an economics major from the business college just because that was what I seemed to be good at in all the 101 classes. Like I basically just took the 101 class that was the most effortless for me. And like, okay, that's my major. I just kind of accepted the first job offer after school I got. It took me a while, actually. I was without permanent work for like a year after I graduated. I was taking like different odd jobs, and I probably had like 7 or 8 odd jobs in the course of a year. And then like now I've been with the same company. I started like at the bottom, like even below where people who have a college degree usually start, worked my way up. Like in all honesty, I'm probably like close to entry level now. And I had to like fight and claw my way back up to get here. But it's an unfulfilling career. It's a career that I'm not satisfied in. And I noticed, probably it was about 2 or 3 years ago that I really got concerned with turning the ship of my life around, and not in all areas, because fortunately, I have a great marriage. I've got some great kids. But there was different things that I had let slide, and my work was one of them. My health was another one. I had become very unhealthy, and was, despite the fact that I thought I had one of these like super metabolisms where I was going to be thin and fit for life, steadily throughout my 20s, I was gaining weight, and in the areas where, men don't want to gain weight, where I was going to have to start thinking about buying new pants soon. And so I just realized at some point, I started, at first, I think in all honesty, I think it started with looking at personal finance blogs, because money was tight, and, I just needed different tips and tricks to save money, be frugal, that kind of thing. And somehow or another, following the links, going down the rabbit trail, that led me to the overall broader world of self-help. And I realized what all that they had to offer, because, I was looking into this, and, a lot of these people are making good money. They have a career that they enjoy, but also they were getting their lives in order in other areas. Like they were building habits. They were taking care of their health. They were doing these things that I'm like, why aren't I doing those things? And hey, I could be. And slowly but surely, like it, I came to understand, like, one thing I started to notice very early on was that people that I followed, bloggers of different kinds and YouTubers, were starting to make some good money off of what they did, just off of blogging and off of YouTube, which is amazing that can happen in this day and age. And I noticed, like, man, their early stuff was, it was useful to me, but it was terrible in so many ways. And I didn't even realize it at the time, but it's like, it's only in comparing their later work to their earlier work and following them on their whole journey that I realized it. And so I think I started to realize that, like, listen, I have good things to share. And if I just stop hiding, if I just stop concerning about, having something perfect, because what always happens is, I'd have all these thoughts that, like, okay, I'll probably start a blog, or I'll probably write a book someday. And, maybe you can relate to that notion of someday. It's such a seductive notion, because your work is always perfect someday. Like, someday you're going to write the great American, not a novel, the great American novel. Someday you're going to write that book that's like on par with Harry Potter in terms of how it changed the culture. Someday you're going to start that business that's going to do everything right, and you're not going to need to fail and start over and, figure out what you're doing as you're going, because you'll have all your ducks in a row. I ran across a quote one time. I think this might be from the 4-Hour Workweek. I know for sure it comes from Tim Ferriss, who's the author of the 4-Hour Workweek. But he said that someday is a disease that will take your dreams to the grave with you. And that was a trap that I had fallen into. Like, look, someday I'm going to get my act together. Someday I'm going to do this thing. Someday I'll start a podcast. Someday I'll start a blog. Well, I've already started 2 blogs. One of them is still up and running, thematthewkent.com. And hey, look at that. Today I started a podcast. So I'm really excited about my journey. I'm really excited about anybody else who is a like mind. Because, here's the thing. If you're good, if you're like, I am living my life to my full potential, I'm living a life that is completely 100% true to myself, I don't need to grow in any area. Like, I don't have a fixed mindset or a growth mindset. I'm awesome, and I've left all you mortals in the dust. Like, this podcast isn't for you. But if you're sitting there thinking, like, man, you know what? Like, I'm not achieving my full potential. I'm still hiding in many respects. I'm still afraid in many respects. I still need some help. I haven't arrived, but I've taken several steps along the journey, and it's been pretty cool. And, for instance, this month was my first month ever making more than $1,000 from the different side hustles that I have online. And the primary driver of that was a wonderful website called medium.com, where I got paid $1,200. So, it's encouraging to see progress there. It's encouraging to see, comments start pouring in from people who are thanking me for my work, and what a wonderful feeling that is to be thanked for your work. It's encouraging that, I have all these examples now, and this podcast is one of them, even just one episode in, of places where I've faced my fear and where I've shipped a real result into the world. So listen, if you want to join me on this journey, I encourage you to subscribe to this podcast. And listen, I can't guarantee a regular publishing schedule. I'm not sure the exact format of all the shows. I think the big broad categories are going to be along the lines of that old quote, right? Becoming healthy, wealthy, and wise. We'll talk about habits. We'll talk about big picture strategy. We'll talk about, down in the dirt, sort of individual tactics. And overall, right, this is going to be a place for people who want to level up. So I encourage you to join me. I encourage you to subscribe. I thank you so much for listening, even if this is your last time with me. Thank you for making it to the end. Thank you for your generosity with your time and attention in listening to my story. And I will see you next time.